You guys remember that cutting board I made for my brother as a Christmas gift almost 2 years ago now? Well, if you have a keen eye and you are paying close attention to this footage here, you will understand what I'm about to tell you and why. You guys see those cracks? You see the twisty wood, the wood that looks like it is cut from the center of a tree? The knots and the voids and the gigantic gaps. Yeah, well, apparently they open back up and completely ruin this gift. Let's see if I can learn from my mistakes in the past and try again for now I guess, third time? We'll see how it goes. Now, for this project, instead of using some reclaimed random cutting board offcuts, I am opting to use some hard maple. The wood I purchased from Woodworker's Source is 2 inches thick. Most of this wood looks pretty good, but I will save some pieces for other projects. For this cutting board, I want to make sure that I am picking the straightest absolute pieces so that I can get a good consistent glue up. Now for the dimensions of this cutting board, I'm shooting for about 17 by 22 inches. And the overall thickness, the final thickness of my end grain cutting board, I'm shooting for about 2 inches. Now this is one of those steps that I would actually change. The internet told me to make small squares. If I had to do this again, I would have left these boards complete. This would have made for less glue ups and less cracks potentially over time. All right, so I keep going back and forth on whether or not I should send these pieces through the joiner before I glue them up. This cutting board I'm making is about, it's gonna end up being about 17 and a half wide by about 24. And this is end grain, so it doesn't really translate well when you're looking at it. But I keep going back and forth on whether or not I should send these things through the joiner. My last cutting board that I made had a lot of cracks in it, and I think that it would help avoiding those cracks. As you can see, these cracks are seemingly minimal at the moment. However, I do have a theory that cracks and other errors kind of like this in this project, or a project like this, are going to be compounding, meaning that one small crack will lead to a bigger crack later on as you keep going through the project. So what do? Do I send these through the joiner that honestly I'm not totally confident in, or do I just glue it up and hope that the problem doesn't hurt me later on? As you can see, ultimately I decided to go ahead and just glue up these 2 panels without any additional woodwork for now. No matter how many times I do these glue ups, they get more and more stressful as you go, but just do a really good job setting up. Make sure that you have all your clamps ready to go, all your cawls ready to go, taped up and everything, and you should be just fine. One quick note is I did actually still use Titebond 3. I think that's the right thing to do, so here we are using it again. Side note, I officially do not like making cutting boards. And to say it's tedious is an understatement. Every single step along the way is so tedious that it just makes this whole thing just, I don't want to do it again. Although I've got 2 other cutting boards that I would like to make. So I don't know, maybe this will all turn out really well and I'll kind of get an understanding of how to go about doing it the correct way, and it will be easier later on in the future, and maybe I'll like it more. But that's where we're at right now. And then, of course, after all of your glue dries and you've let it sit for a while, take it out of the cawls and the clamps, and I just went ahead with this old chisel and scraped all the dry glue off. This way my joiner isn't doing a ton of work trying to remove glue, and it's just focused on removing the wood. All right, it's been probably about a week since the last clip that I made, because like I said, I was contemplating trying to figure out what to do with this block that I glued up, and big storm and everything, so I've been kind of preoccupied. But before I left, the last thing that I had in my mind, I wrote down on this because I think it's a good idea, and it is to plane first, then decide. Yes, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to send both of these blocks through the planer, and I'm just going to look at the cracks and see what they look like. The plan here is to now send the two potential glue edges through the joiner so that I could get a flush glue up. My plan did not go as I thought it would. Plan was to flip these up on end, and by doing that, you counteract any inaccuracies you have in your blade or your knives on your joiner. And I sent it through a couple times and had some issues, so I sent it through again, and the more I sent it through, the worse it got. And so now you can see there is a pretty significant crack going down the whole thing. So, I've mentioned this before in other projects, but this thing is a freaking antique. The cutting head on it is completely seized, so I'm not able to adjust these knives or sharpen them. The table is pretty flat, and it is seemingly perfectly square as well, so I don't know why it didn't work. Operator error is very possible. I don't know, you guys let me know from what you saw. Right now, my current plan is to go find a commercial grade joiner, like an older one, and buy that. Usually I've been seeing them on Marketplace for less than $400 or $500, somewhere in there. So that would be a great plan to have in the future, but for right now, and this project doesn't really help me out. But I think I have a solution. Ideally, I should be able to put these, because I have a parallel or a square face here with the outside. The same thing should work on my table saw. So what I'm going to do is I've set these up so that I understand which way they go together again. I have indicated on this side that side needs to be up and that side as well. And so what I'm going to do is one by one, I'll take and put the upside up, go through my table saw and just remove just the smallest teeny bit that I can and see if that works. I'm not really happy with this interior piece right here. It's much skinnier than that one is. I'm just kind of hoping that it doesn't mess up the overall look. Honestly, at this point, I'm in my experimental phase, and not to say that I have a lot of experience, but I have some experience doing this, and I wish that I were not in my experimental phase, because it's getting frustrating and I'm losing my motivation for this project. I wish I could just figure it out, get a win, get some more confidence going forward, but I know that comes with practice. So here we go. And hindsight being what it is, probably should have just done this from the beginning. I have a lot of confidence in that table saw, whereas I didn't have any confidence in my joiner to begin with. I should have just done that and it would have been fine. As you can see, they lined up great. I glued them together, scraped away the dried glue after it, and ran into another slight issue. But the only thing I'm worried about now is that little bit of a ledge. You can barely see it, but if we start to cut all these up and then glue them as an end grain board, you're going to notice that. Long story short, I have a Milwaukee trim router, and I printed this little sled for it that it'll ride on, and I went and bought some of this 3/4 inch stock square tubing, and this is going to ride on top of this rail, go back and forth, and flatten this out. This works really good in theory, but ultimately did not work out the way I wanted it to.
The M18 Milwaukee trim router that I had a lot of problems with adjustability. And what would happen is I would set my depth, I would clamp it down, and then I would go. But as I was pushing down on the router, it would slightly adjust, maybe a 64th of an inch at a time, and it was just enough that I could see a difference in the plane that I was doing. See right here, I made no adjustment, but it went down another just barely anything, and it gave me a lot of frustrations. But ultimately what I found out is that if I set the depth on my router and then beat it against the table to really set that depth as deep as it could possibly go while it's already set and clamped in there, I know this is complicated to kind of understand, but it seemed to be stable enough that I could probably do this and get away with it. And then, of course, after I got one side completed, I took my sander to it to just remove those swirl marks. It was actually looking really good at this point. Once I got it dialed in, set the depth, beat it down, do the entire thing. And the other key is to do a really light pass, like no more than 1/32 at a time. And then, of course, once that side's done, we go back to a little bit of sanding. One of the more difficult things when you're making an end grain cutting board is to actually cut the end grains so that they're all perfectly flat and square and all the different things. And it really takes a massive crosscut sled if you don't already have one. There probably are other ways to do this. For instance, if I had a bandsaw, I could easily put that on there and cut these strips out pretty quickly. But I didn't, and I'm a little upset because I did lose all the footage of me making this crosscut sled. But this thing is just absolutely massive. The scale really doesn't even take effect here just because we're so zoomed in, I guess. I don't know. But the overall width of my sled is 36 inches wide, and it is about 24 inches deep, which was more than enough for me to get this cutting board in here in its full size. And then more importantly, later on, when it comes to trimming up the full size of the cross-cut glued up board that I'm making, I can use it again there as well. But as you can see, I'm taking a lot of precaution. I set up a fence with this clamp. Ultimately, I'd like to add a T-clamp later on, but I'm just moving it over so it just touches and it's not being bumped, making a cut, turning off the saw, removing the piece, getting it set up for the next cut. And now the most satisfying part of this video, we finally get to see what our end grain cutting board is going to look like. What do you guys think? I'll be completely honest with you guys. I was a little worried at this part. As you can see, these are pushed together as tight as I can. Obviously, I can clamp it and make it go a little tighter, but I'm starting to see some joints. So before I really start to get into fixing anything with tools, I'm going to go ahead and mark these and figure out which pattern I want to make using the end grain. And with a little help from my beautiful wife, this is what we came up with.
All right, it's been probably another week now since I left off on that last clip, but I'm experiencing a little bit of an issue now. I started to realize that our flattening jig, although in theory it's really well, it did not work out the way that I had planned it to be. But anyway, we have a very real problem now that I would like to solve before we go and purchase any more tools, because I'm still really trying to figure out exactly how I can do this the proper way. And I mentioned, or maybe I didn't mention earlier, but when I was putting these through the joiner, I was experiencing some issues, and I thought, you know, maybe that there is a little bit of inexperience there and just operator error, and I am totally up to admitting that, and I think that that is a legitimate issue. So I need more practice on the joiner at the very least. I need more practice using my planer. I need more practice using everything. So I did a little bit of research and I'm looking into it and I'm trying to figure out how to fix our current problem, which is a long-winded way of saying we have some gaps. So as you can see, and now I've alternated these and I'm pretty sure this is the ultimate pattern that I want to go with. I do really like these ingrained pieces that are a little bit misshapen, or they give you a little bit of like a butterfly effect. I also really like the ingrain going different patterns here. It kind of gives it a really cool, once again, I'm gonna call that a butterfly look. So ultimately I want it to sit like this. So there are some that are alternating, and I think that where you can see these bigger gaps, it is just accentuating because they're alternate sides flipped together. It is just making these cracks look much bigger than they should be. So right here, this crack is very tight, or this gap is very tight. And I kind of have these in clamps right now, but let me loosen these clamps up and we'll get a little bit better idea of the gaps we're talking about. So that crack, that crack, that crack, skip one, that crack, skip, then that crack, skip. We have a lot of joints that need to be fixed, but how do we go about fixing those? My initial thought is that because almost every other one has a tight gap, that we already have one flat surface, I could just put it through the planer and give us another parallel surface. So the problem with that is that, and I've done a couple of test pieces like this, I have another, and this is pine, so it's not a great representation of it, but I have another ingrained kind of similar set of wood that we were dealing with earlier. And the issue is that when you send it through the planer, you're gonna start to have issues with the planer knives are running this way while the wood joints are running this way. And they're what you would call perpendicular to the cutting knives, which is not an ideal cut on the planer. And it didn't happen on the glue joint here, but it did kind of break this piece apart. And like I said, this is pine and it's not the same quality. I think it would be ultimately okay to send these through. However, the bigger problem that we're dealing with, and let me see if I can find a good example of it, is the planer gives what is called snipe. So as you can see here, I actually got a pretty good surface, ignore that. And then right here, you're seeing what is called snipe, and that at the end of a piece, your knives will dig in because it's flaring up, and then you'll get that uneven surface. So ultimately, I don't want to put this through there because of snipe, because of that perpendicular grain cut, and other things like that. So my very first thought that I had was to take these, assume that we have 3 straight sides on this piece. So if we put this piece or this side of this board on the bed of the joiner, then we should be able to put this through and make it flat. But that's assuming that this side over here is already flat, and that would make a parallel face. Except for it's not, because it's not referencing like it would in a planer the other side. So you're not making a parallel face. This is not what this is designed for. However, I want to say maybe that it's my best option. And I don't know, because once again, here we are, inexperienced, and the only thing that I can do is test. But I think what I would like to do is clean up this bed and then do a couple of test pieces to run some boards. I actually got some just cheap scrap wood that is not great. And I'm gonna practice by running those through the joiner and see if I can get any better, if I can get a little bit more confidence on it, and go from there. All right, well, I'm not sure anybody's ever gonna believe this because I didn't think it was possible. Apparently my joiner is no longer an option. I am trying to disassemble it because I found that the knives were all out of alignment. And during trying to take the outfeed table out, I was hitting it with this because it was kind of seized. This is a rubber dead blow hammer, by the way. And yeah, apparently cast iron is not as sturdy as I thought it was. I'm really honestly not even understanding how this could happen. It's a pretty thick cast iron table. Now it's old, but I was just hitting it with a dead blow hammer. I wasn't going to town on it. I'm just kind of dumbfounded at this point. I didn't think that was even possible. So now my antique has turned into a piece of scrap metal.
Well, it actually turns out I'm an idiot, and this is a very common thing that happens when you hit cast iron. it shatters.
All right, so the last time I talked to you, I was very upset and had some broken tools laying around, but I have since fixed my problem, and it wasn't cheap, but I think long term this is going to make a lot of sense for what I'm trying to do. And although it was a hard bullet to bite right now, I think it'll be worth it. So check it out. Might I introduce you to my brand new Laguna, or I guess Supermax is what this one is labeled as, 1632 drum sander. This thing is good at obviously sanding, and it's called a 1632 because you have a 16-inch capacity here, and then you can flip your boards around and send it through. So overall max capacity is 32 inches. Of course, when you have a drum sander, you may not really appreciate the cloud of dust that it puts out. So I went and also bought this air or dust collector from Harbor Freight as well. It's not the best on the market, but I've actually heard pretty good reviews for how much it costs, and I actually it was on sale for about $400. So $400 there, and then ouch, $1,700 here. So like I said, hard bullet to swallow or something like that, but I think this is going to be a good solution. So now what I'm going to do is I plan on coming over here and finding the largest crack, and I'm going to flip these two on their side, put them through the drum sander, just take off enough to get rid of the end high spots, and hopefully that will sandwich them together a little bit tighter. I don't think it's going to be a perfect solution, but I think right now that is the best solution that I have. We will see. Also, going forward, my plan is to not ever do a cutting board that is wider than 16 inches, because 16 inches is now what I can handle on my drum sander. For smaller cutting boards that I plan on doing, I do plan on doing a batch of edge grain cutting boards, so maybe I can sell a few and, I don't know, maybe recoup some of this money that I've put in here. But my plan for that is to keep to what my planer will handle, which is 12.5 inches. And that's actually still a pretty good size cutting board. What I've been doing for cutting boards is extreme overkill, and I probably should not be doing that in the first place, at least to get introduced to creating cutting boards and to refine my process. So ultimately, that should not be an issue going forward, but I do have a 32-inch capacity if I ever feel like getting crazy. So we'll see how it goes. Okay, I spent a lot of time going through all of these cracks and just making sure that I could get it to be the absolute best that I possibly can. So hopefully now we're giving myself the best chance to not have cracks happen or pop up after I glue it up and let it dry and set for a while. So I think at this point, there's not really anything else that I can do to prevent this thing from not working. I think that I've done everything given my circumstances. Obviously, if we had started fresh and all of our tools were honed and perfect and not crumbly messes, then we would have been a little bit better prepared. But I think at last, right now, we are to the point to where I am ready to smear some glue on this. I'm gonna just sit back, relax, get some Type Bond 3, watch some Supercross, and hope for the best.
I just want to pause for a second and talk a little bit about how infuriating or just how difficult this project has been for me. And it's been to the point where I think at this point in the video, I've spent almost 6 months trying to build this, and it really just does not show on video how daunting tasks can be for me sometimes, and how much more it just compounds the issues of making it difficult. So my question to you guys is, am I the only one that does this to myself when making projects, or is this a typical thing that everybody goes through and typical YouTubers just don't show this kind of stuff? At this point in the project, I'm starting to figure out, I guess I'm starting to gain a little bit of confidence. Trying to figure out this drum sander was a little bit of a learning curve, but honestly, it was pretty simple as far as all the other tools that I have in my shop. But once I started going, I realized, you take very shallow passes, you do a very slow speed. If it's burning, you slow it down a little bit more, lift it up a little bit more, and you can fine tune this machine really well. And if you're wondering, for reference, this video right here that you're watching is sped up 2,000 times. So it is a very slow process. Take your time and everything should go well. Finally, we're starting to see this thing come back together as an actual cutting board. So after all of that drum sanding was done, I put up on the table saw, used my, I actually have a panel jig from the last time I made a cutting board, which was an absolute failure. And I cut left and right side, and then I switched it over and then ended up cutting both of the ends just using the table saw fence. And honestly, I was a little bit worried here that I was going to be a little out of square, but this thing looked absolutely perfect. The only thing I'm worried about at this point is, will these gaps open up over time? I let this cutting board sit in my garage unconditioned for almost another month. After a month of side-eyeing this piece of wood as I walked through my garage, I was actually pleasantly surprised. I fought myself on this one for a little while, but I ultimately ended up going with a roundover instead of a chamfer. I think the roundover actually looks pretty good. Making a roundover is also much more forgiving than a chamfer is because you don't have the square edges to deal with. Speaking of things I went back and forth on, this juice groove really was causing me a lot of anxiety. Like I was talking about earlier, you do want a juice groove on a cutting board where you plan to cut meat or like juicy things, obviously, because that juice groove is going to capture all those juices and keep it from falling over onto the counter and making a mess. In the long run, I was a little hesitant because I knew that cutting into this board, making it thinner in places, and introducing more opportunity for moisture to sit on this board is ultimately going to weaken the board over time, but I did it anyway. My brother really wanted one, so I went ahead and did it.
Okay, now that we are done with probably one of the most terrifying processes for me, you get so far into a project, you spent so much time on it, and then you go take a wheel that's spinning at 5,000 RPM and try to cut a very precise groove in it. And I do really like that insert style of templating to get the juice groove instead of bordering and then doing it the other way. Because I have done it the other way in the past and there is a lot of room for error, whereas this seems a little bit more stable for me. So that turned out pretty well. I also was able to get just in between a couple of grooves. So you can see there's a line here and then there's a line here and I am right in the middle. And I'm hoping that this, because juice is going to be in there, will minimize the effects that moisture will have on this board. Of course, in the corners, we did hit it. There's no way to really avoid that there, but I think overall we turned out pretty good. You can see we do have a couple of burn marks for places I had to stop. That should not be too big of a deal. I should just be able to sand that out with some sandpaper real quick. I don't think I'm ever going to be done sanding this thing, so here we go. Let's just keep going. I believe after many years of sanding, I am actually done sanding. Here's what it looks like. I'd love to hear if you guys have a better solution for sanding those juice grooves, because using a dowel and sanding paper is not an easy task. From here, the next steps, I'm going to flip it over and drill 4 holes in the bottom so that we have feet. And then I am going to soak it in some mineral oil overnight. When we get to that step, I'll get back to you. As I am finding my feet for my cutting board, I'm forgetting a crucial step because I went all the way back through the sanding grits and ended with 220 before I finish with mineral oil and whatever else I put on there. I need to make sure that I water pop and then sand it down to get all those fuzzies from coming back in the future the first time you use the cutting board. So we're gonna do that. These kids are out here having a blast. So I'm gonna get this done.
For the feet, I ended up using the same rubber feet I got on Amazon last time. They've actually held up really well. I'll go ahead and link those down below for you. If you guys remember the last cutting board that I made, I bought a small bottle of mineral oil to soak my cutting board in, and ultimately it ended up using every single ounce of it and probably could have used some more. My solution this time around is to get a large container, fill it full of mineral oil, and then allow that cutting board to soak 12 to 24 hours so that it has an opportunity to soak up as much of that mineral oil as it possibly can. I will leave the links for both the container and the mineral oil down below in the description. And yes, if you're wondering, that is a stainless steel cat litter box. For some reason, containers this large that accommodate my ridiculously large cutting board are extremely overpriced. I did have to get a little creative here. I don't know why I didn't think about this, but guess what? Wood floats. So what I ended up doing is using some of these paint standoffs that I've printed in the past upside down, and I just clamped a couple of pieces of plywood over top, and that helped hold the wood down.
Alrighty folks, here we are. We're in our final stages. It has been months of work and procrastination. I'll be completely honest with you, a lot of procrastination. But we are finally to this point. It is completely submerged in mineral oil. Ultimately, I would like to keep this thing soaked for at least 12 hours. Maybe I'll go 24, depends on how soon I want to take it out, because I am excited to be done with this project. All right, it's been about 12 hours or so. So we're gonna take this thing out of here, and I'm gonna set up some kind of drip tray for the board so it has time to dry. Well, this is kind of interesting. I just took it out, and you can see the backside is very dark and the front side is very dark, but all the edge grain is very light. It's kind of pretty. Gives it a little bit of a contrast there. All right, so I just took it out, as you saw, drip dried, and then I wiped it down completely, and I'm gonna leave it sitting here for approximately 24 hours. And then it actually did take another 24 hours to completely dry. It was almost as if the wood was still like bleeding out some of that mineral oil, so maybe it was oversaturated. But ultimately I ended up putting the feet on it, and this is what it looks like.
After allowing the cutting board to fully dry, I purchased some board butter, if you will. It's a beeswax and mineral oil combination off of Amazon. I will admit you can make this a lot cheaper than you can buy it, but as far as convenience goes, this is pretty good stuff. It is just mineral oil and just beeswax, so no extra crap that's in there for your food. If you guys are interested, I'll leave that link down below. And after allowing this thing to dry overnight again, all you have to do is buff out all the extra wax that is remaining. In the world of YouTube woodworking, we rarely see the real story. You watch someone knock out a flawless project in a 12-minute video. We see the perfectly crafted piece, the clean montage, and the flawless final reveal. But what you don't see are the failures, the frustrations, the piles of scrap, or what happens months later after the camera stops rolling. This cutting board humbled me. What countless videos promised was going to be a fun weekend project turned into a 2-year journey with 3 separate attempts, more than a few moments of genuine frustration, and a lot of hard-earned lessons. And honestly, I think that's worth talking about. The reality of making things is messier than the highlight reel suggests. Not every glue up goes according to plan. Not every finish comes out looking like glass, and sometimes you have to walk away, let it sit, and come back with fresh eyes. But after 2 years, 3 attempts, and way more sandpaper than I care to admit, I finally built something I'm proud of. Something that I know my brother will use and appreciate for years to come. This project taught me some valuable lessons about patience, problem solving, and how not to rush complex builds. I've learned a lot from my mistakes, and I'm excited to start the next one. I've got some new ideas for even better grain patterns, tighter fits, and a few design improvements that I would like to try. Woodworking isn't about being perfect on the first try. It's about constantly getting better with every project.